And we're live. Ready. Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist. The Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee. We have our head coach, Chad Timmerman, with us.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Chad, your lighting is impeccable again, as always, in this new studio that he has. We also have Cannondale and TrainerRoad's Amber Pierce.
Good morning, everybody.
Good to have you, Amber. And we have our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
We were working on your lighting, but ever since Chad stepped it up, we all look bad. So now we have to.
Setting that bar high.
Share the secret. It's really simple. You can do it.
Let's be honest, though. It's not just the lighting. Come on.
I mean, really, it's Chad. He has presence,
I have been
right?
working out, so.
Speaking of, Nate, you've been working out a ton. I saw you yesterday, and I was like, "Whoa, you look
Did you
jacked."
see me yesterday?
Yeah, at the office here. Yep.
All right.
Yeah,
that's true. I don't know what to say.
Can't argue.
My point is, you don't look like you're prepping for Cape Epic. That's the point I want to get to here. You look jacked, but you don't look like you're prepping for Cape Epic.
Thank you. And this is cycling jacked. I don't think I'm real jacked, but I weighed myself this morning and I was 197. At Leadville, I came in at like 181, 182. Apple keeps giving me you took a picture of me, John, at Leadville where I was like going like this, and it's on my iPad, and you know Apple gives you those photos. It's like the only photo on my iPad, so I see it all the time, and I'm like, wow, you were so skinny back then. I'm going to hurt Sophia on the flats. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday. I wonder what Sophia's thoughts are on all this, where she's at with it.
She's okay. She because she has the Olympics, and then Cape Epic is going to be, her mindset has to change to, Cape Epic is like exploring Africa's countryside at a leisurely pace. And kind of like playing on downhills rather than like race to win. And she gets free trip. So that's
pretty good.
It's
pretty
good.
good.
You guys are gonna
and
have
we'll
fun.
still beat Chad and Pete. Like Chad,
Yeah, probably. I can't see how not. I mean,
do you ride? How many do you do more podcasts per week, or do you ride more per week?
no, I've been riding 2 or 3 times a week. We're in a heat wave right now. So I tried to do a bike workout yesterday. It didn't go so well, but I blame that on the sleep because it's crazy hot here. I mean, it's like yesterday it was 111, day before it was 109, which is freakish for up here.
That's like 42 degrees, isn't it? Celsius. I think
It's way up there.
Somewhere.
For sure. It's a heat wave. It'll end, but I'm in the midst of it now, and sleep's been garbage, and the workouts have taken a bit of a dive, but the outside rides up until that point have been good. It's super hilly around here, really pitchy climbs, so it's not hard to do work.
Yeah.
Did you know you could train inside too? Do you have AC?
I heard about this. We should talk after the podcast. Yeah.
Chad, what's your FTP?
I just left to set it what it was, so I think like 286, and that's probably pretty close. So I haven't lost anything, which is super cool. Like 185. That's frozen as well.
Cool.
I got work to do.
Nate cracks me up. It's going to be, I did a long ride a couple weeks ago, and I say long ride, it was like 5.5 hours. And I realized that every day I'm going to have to do like more than that.
No, we have a big race coming up, but I don't think it's even on the thing. Nationals is next weekend?
It's next weekend. Yeah.
Are you going to even be on the podcast next week, or are we recording early?
No, we're set to record early for next week. So I'm going to
talk about this?
Sure. Yeah. I don't like to talk about myself a whole lot because listeners sometimes say they hear enough from me. So
I don't care. Like
this is a big deal.
No, this is a big deal. This is a real big deal.
We're excited about this.
John, say what nationals you're going to race. What are your goals? What are you coming in at? And the competition, and we'll try to keep it under 45 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Start the timer. So Mountain Bike National Championships here in the States. It's in Winter Park, Colorado. Again, like it was the last time they had it. Cross country Olympic and short track, both of those disciplines. I race cross country Olympic next Thursday in the afternoon, and then next Friday in the morning I race short track. I'm coming into this, I think, by all indications, with using seasons and PRs on TrainerRoad, and by all indications at looking at just power to weight where I'm at right now, and by all indications of looking at segments on Strava and race results, I'm fitter than I've ever been, which is great. So, I'm right. Yeah. I think that my power to weight ratio probably is not quite as high as it was in 2015. I'm at 4.98 right now. I'm like so close. So, but in Reno, yeah, at 4,500 feet. And most of my training, like my average training elevation is closer to 6,000, like 5,500 to 6,000. But like I'm able to hold 330 for, 40 minutes. And that's, it's hard. It's not, but it's also, it feels thresholdish. You know what I mean?
Sea level adjusted. I'm just going to keep jumping in. Sea level adjusted, that's 5.25, 5.3, somewhere around there for John.
The weird thing is when I've been going down to elevation recently, but it's hard to say because it's been really hot every time I've done it. And heat actually has kind of like a similar FTP degradation effect to altitude. Mm-hmm. But I haven't been able to push high above that down at different or lower elevation. But the one thing is back when I had a higher, and this is something to really help with, we always talk about not comparing yourself now to yourself, however many years ago or whatever your peak was. But if I look back objectively at when I had that higher watt kg, when I was just over 5, I was really like fragile in terms of, and I was really like one dimensional. I couldn't roll with the punches in an XC race. And now I feel like I have all the tools to be able to roll with the punches. That said, the people I'm racing against are so fast. Like I know that if I have a great day and things go well, I could win. And that's super exciting. I also know that there are a lot of people in the same exact boat, and it's not a huge field. I think that we're going to have like 20 racers, but within those 20 racers, I genuinely think that we probably have 9 or 10 that have a very good shot at winning. So, and when you race up there, it's 8,600 feet is where it starts. And then I think that we climb like 5 or 600 every lap. So any, one wrong thing, one bad move where you decided to chase something down you probably shouldn't have can put you in the box for the rest of the race. So, but I'm really excited for it. For elevation last year, I did the worst thing possible. I showed up like 4 days before and, or like 3 days before. And, just like Amber's reaction, that was my reaction every day. And it just got louder. Like I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, I'm so much worse than yesterday. So I'm just going in the evening before, and then I'm racing. Yeah.
What's the course like? Is it technical?
No, it's not. It's a big up and a big down. It's about a 10-minute climb. And after that 10-minute climb, it's like a kind of traversing long, fast descent, but it's not technical. So
this is the same course as a couple years ago?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately,
John has technical skills.
I would love if we had EWS descents going down. Bring it on, USA Cycling, please. That would be really cool to have a big climb and big descent like that, but it's not. So, but I'm going up right before to minimize the effects of elevation. I've been trying to do something. I've done a few sets of these and it's absolutely miserable. There's a study, and actually I'll link to it down below, where they looked at so usually when you do elevation training, you keep the intensity pretty low, right? Like, I don't know, Amber, if you ever went to like Andorra or spots like that, but when you do that, you don't go there and you don't just slam VO2 the whole time, right? It's like pretty relatively chill. And there's this study that was looking at, instead of taking the chill approach, going up to elevation, and instead doing 15 on, 30 seconds off, and repeating and doing that 7 times, and then repeating that set 4 times. And that was like the protocol that they used for these athletes. I believe that they were measuring, I can't remember exactly what they were measuring. If they were measuring like red blood cell count, hematocrit, or whatever they were measuring, but they basically showed that for some athletes that was more effective at bringing about elevation acclimation instead of going about it with a lower intensity way. So I've been going up to like 8,000 feet and above, 8,000 to 10,000 feet, and doing those, and absolutely miserable doing 30-15s up there. So, but
smiling. Chad just smirked. He's like, he kind of likes it. Familiar. Like people are getting hurt, and he's like,
That's my job. You got to make people hurt. That's how you get faster.
That's it.
It's one way anyway.
Was
that Buchheit? And do you remember?
I'll find the link. I'll see if I can find the link in the midst of the podcast here, and we can get back to it. Or maybe if anybody's in the live chat right now on YouTube, which, by the way, give us a thumbs up if you are.
Paul Larson, Martin Buchheit. That's their shtick.
And it's one of those sets where like you finish the sets, and when you're up there, you just kind of get off the bike. Like you try to keep pedaling, but you can't. Like you just and you get off the bike and you sit there for a little bit and catch your breath, if you even can up there. So, but yeah, it's been going really well. The bike, I think, is going to make a huge difference. If I'm honest, I've mentioned this before. I'm not sponsored by Specialized at all. I picked this bike after testing a bunch of them, and it's really fast. I'm debating on not going with a dropper post. So, and going high post. It's not overly technical, and I feel like I might lose, who knows, like maybe 5 bike lengths on the descent, but my dropper post weighs a pound more than my normal one. And I know that seems silly, but at this point, I feel like I'm shaving all of my pounds down and working really hard. And it would be a shame to just throw a boat anchor of a pound on there when I don't need it. So I don't know, maybe I'll do like, when I get there the day before, I'll do like some laps with and without to try to decide.
Of all the people that I would say this to, you and Keegan are like the only people I'd be like, and Bryce Lewis, you could do it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, he's
normally
debating
this is
too.
not recommended. Keegan?
Yeah, he's debating too. I wonder if he's going to run a hardtail. I think if I could, I would run a hardtail on this course too. But the Epic still will weigh like 21 pounds. So it doesn't weigh much. It'll be plenty light. So, and then on short track, I'm really excited too, because I think I can do really well there. It happens at the same elevation, which short track up at that elevation is like so painful. But
did you say that's like a week later?
It's the next day.
Oh,
so I race in the afternoon, and then that's the next morning. So,
okay.
But yeah, I'm trying to get some fast rolly skinny tires on for that one. So I might take some risks there with the dirt stuff, maybe being a little bit more slippery, but it'll roll a whole lot faster. So we'll see.
Who cares? Send it.
That's right. Send it. So if you're at national championships, I'd love to see you. I'll be staying in Tabernash, which isn't in the village itself, but close by. But if I'm there, say hi. I know that I don't usually talk a whole lot before the race, and I might look scary and intimidating, but say hi. So I'd love to see you all
after the race, everyone.
That would be best. I agree. So yeah, that's what's going on there. I won a race last weekend again. Past some key people that when I've been very fast, I've been able to beat them, and then usually I can't. So yeah, I'm excited. Should be good. Can I mention something really quick on here? The blog. We've had some really great article. We always have great ones. Megan, Jesse, and Sean do such a fantastic job, our copywriters, but 2 articles that I feel like would be particularly interesting to people listening to this podcast right now. One, how to analyze criterium data to become a better crit racer. Sean wrote a great article on that one that walks you through making sense of the crazy spikes. We just did race analysis on my Tulsa Tough race, and we're going to include the screenshots so you can see what the power profile looks like of that. And it's an absolute horror show looking at the spikes that exist there. So it's a great article that'll help you break that down.
How well, Amber, you were in that, right? Or was it just Pete?
Just Pete.
Yeah. Did he rip you apart, or did you do pretty well?
I did well. I think that Pete was soft on me. I had a lot of spots where I could have improved. That said, I improved throughout the race until I didn't. So yeah, spoiler alert. So, and then one other article that's fantastic, Normalize Power, what it is and how to use it. Even though a lot of us refer to MP regularly, this is like a really good refresher on that one. So check it out and subscribe to the blog. You totally should. You'll get fantastic stuff coming to you all the time. The Science of Getting Faster podcast, the Successful Athletes podcast. We just did one with an athlete that qualified for Kona, another one, many of them. Congrats to all of you that are doing that right now. It's super exciting. And we have another one with an athlete or a coach and an athlete coming up next week. That's fantastic. It's just great. So
I just had a great thought. Okay. So
yes,
we're talking about getting better lighting. I wasn't listening to you, John, at all. Sorry. But we have so Philips Hue lights.
This whole time.
We just be
put
honest.
Yeah. I put them in my in my house and my bedroom so far. But I'm going to put them in here so we can have better lighting, because what they do is each light bulb, you can control the intensity and the color. But what I can do is I can react live with colors to what people say. like change the color of the room without saying anything. I could have a little iPad up here and like switch around based on when people say something bad. I wonder if I could do a little strobe too. I don't know. But anyways, this has nothing to do with cycling, and I just wanted to share.
Well, I'm going to share this because it'll be relatable for our listeners. I was listening to another podcast, and they had a listener build these dials that that are like plug into a dashboard on a computer where the different hosts can all show their interest levels with a dial based on what's currently being said. So when they look at it and they see that everybody's losing interest, they just move on and they go to the next thing. So
you mean everyone outside?
No, like they do it within the
actual
host.
hosts. Yeah.
And all I'm saying is that if somebody wants to productize that and make it digital, first of all of you would troll us and go all over the place with it. But at the same time, that would be pretty funny to see and helpful. So
I was going to say, in order for this to work, Nate, you're going to have to pay attention.
What was that?
Well done. Yeah. Well done, Nate. Adaptive training update. Over 6,000 people have been added to the adaptive training beta now. So a lot of you listening to this have probably received that invite over the past few weeks. Super exciting.
You just hurt a lot of people's feelings.
If you're not in yet, it's probably coming soon. And some exciting stuff with it. Just the feedback is overwhelmingly positive. People are absolutely loving it. So it's really cool. Can we get into Florian's question? He says, dear team, and Amber, this one is really directed at you because you have way more experience than all of us, probably combined in this. So Florian says, dear team at TrainerRoad, I'm a Cat 4 in the UK and had great success preparing myself for the race season with endless sweet spot work in winter. It really paid off, and I was even able to recover quickly after a broken collarbone in February. During races, I feel strong and I'm able to focus on what's happening around me instead of just fighting for dear life. Oh, isn't that like the best feeling when you're in
such a nice
yes, yes.
Yeah.
When you're in a race and you're just like, you feel like it's quicksand the whole time. Oh, it's just so stressful. And yeah, it's hard. He says, through progression levels, I also felt a shift this year. I'm not paying much attention to my marginally improving FTP anymore, but I can feel how punchy races make me less tired and I'm able to hang on much longer. Thank you for that. This is like such a huge vote, right, Amber, for progression levels, because it's another way to measure your improvement. So like, even if your FTP is not where it is, where you want it to be, or where you thought it would be, anything else, when you see your VO2 ramping up, or you see your sweet spot, or you see your anaerobic or your tempo, whatever it is, that's tangible improvement. It's
right.
So cool.
We always talk about how progress isn't linear. So it's fun to see how you get little bursts and jumps of progress in different areas at different times, because your body is adapting to the workload, and the way that it adapts isn't always going to be linear. So it's nice to have different channels of feedback to continually track how that progress is going forward.
Yeah. If I don't have progression levels at this point, I feel blind. Like I feel blinded, like I lack insight to what my training is actually doing. So he says, here's my question. I'm now at race 7 or 8 of the year, and I'm still learning how to move through the pack. It's quite easy on the straights, and I have a good feel for momentum there. But I'm struggling with their tight corners, especially in Cat 4 races. We are more often bunched up than strung out, which makes it hard to stay in position. I have a good feel for how to take corners when I'm at the very back where I don't want to be, or at the front where I do want to, or where I don't want to be either. So how do I take corners in a big bunch when I'm forced to take bad lines? Thanks for all your work and support, from Florian. And this resonates with me too, because you'll be able to see in the Tulsa Tough race, I was struggling with this very thing. So it's hard, right, Amber? What do we do?
Right. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about what makes a good line. If you're riding by yourself, we know a good line is a line where you have to brake the least, decelerate the least, where you can carry the most momentum. And that's much easier to do when you're by yourself. Like you said, if you're on the very front of the race, there's no constraints. You can take the line that you want, and that seems great. Whereas if you're at the very back and you can have a little space of the person in front of you, you can choose that line. But what happens when you're in the middle of the group? Well, that's where what constitutes a good line is really context dependent, right? Because what makes a line good is going to be different in different scenarios. So if you're by yourself, taking a good line is where you don't have to lose maybe any momentum, depending on how the corner is set up. But when you're in a group, and especially if the pace isn't going fast enough to be single file through a corner, you're going to be losing some momentum in that corner. So what's really going to make a good line in that scenario is more to do with your position and a little bit less to do with momentum. So in the group, you want to prioritize position, and you still want to conserve as much momentum as possible, which in some cases really amounts to trying to minimize deceleration, because you're going to be decelerating no matter what, especially if it's a tight corner, and especially if there's a big field, and especially if it's bunched up. So I would say the first thing to do is to adjust your expectations, because you're not going to be able to, in the middle of a group, take the line that you want. It's just not realistic. And I think it's important to note here that that's not realistic for anybody. I mean, that doesn't happen in the pro races either. It's not like you get to this point where you can just be in the middle of the group and still find the exact line that you want to take. You really have to defer to the people around you in order to be safe. So adjusting expectations is probably the first step here. The ideal line is rarely going to be possible in a group because no one gets to pick their line through the corner in a group unless you're that first person through. So in this case, again, you want to be prioritizing your position over the perfect line. And now we're talking about a matter of degrees. We're not talking about good line versus bad line. We're talking about, is there a line that's relatively better? And once you're in the corner, you're in. There's not a lot you can do. But as the race is going on, you can start to pick up on things like, is it better to set up for this corner on the inside or the outside of the group? You might find that one of those lines toward the inside or toward the outside allows you to carry a little bit more momentum than the other one does. So now you're starting to look for matters of degrees. It's not good or bad. It's, is there a line or a way that I can set up for each corner within the group that's going to give me a little bit more momentum through the corner? And I would say that in the group, the best line is a line that's going to keep you in position, not necessarily the fastest line. And that's a hard thing to wrap your head around, especially if you're used to training on your own or in groups where you have more of an ability to choose your line on a group ride. Again, momentum. So in the group, position comes first and then momentum second. And you're going to be losing some momentum in the corners, especially if it's bunched up, like you said. So from a technical perspective, nothing really changes. All of the technique and the mechanics of going around a corner in a group are exactly the same as they would be if you're by yourself. You just happen to have more constraints. So in a group, I would say the two things that you want to work on in order to corner well in a group are think about setting up before the corner. So are you going to set up on the inside or the outside of the group? Sometimes you just really don't have a choice and you're just smack in the middle of it. And that's okay too, right? If you're in the middle of it, again, number one priority is positioning. So try not to lose position. Prioritize that position. That means getting your handlebars maybe in front of one person next to you or a couple people next to you before the corner, and then setting up on that entry. So you want your handlebars in front if you can. If not, just maintain your space, establish space, be visible. And then as you're moving through the corner, follow the fishies. Like think of it as you're with a school of fish and all of those fish are moving through with the same line. So you just follow the fishies, kind of follow that school of fish. You will probably have to take a line that's not going to be the ideal line, but if you try to minimize deceleration, if you establish your space, you can maintain your position through the corner and then look for ways to move up between the next corner and the following one. So following the fishies, and again, that's going position first and then momentum second. And again, in most cases, you're going to have to slow down for the corners. It's just how it is. And that's the reality for everyone around you. What you want to do is make sure that you're not losing position there though. So it's just about finding a safe place for you, establishing your space, setting up well, staying safe as you follow the fishy through the corner, and it should be good. So it's not something that happens overnight that immediately feels comfortable. But I would take a step back and don't judge yourself too harshly, because if you have to slow down for a corner, it's just normal. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong per se.
This is what Pete is trying to teach me, and you can really mess up your race if you don't do this right. So you have the corners, and you have a corner like Amber said that you just have to naturally slow down. Is that he always before the corner he will leave so if you're like really close to somebody on their wheel, he will actually leave a gap of maybe a half a bike length or 3/4 of a bike length, not enough to let someone else in. And then he will brake less than them, take the corner faster, and then accelerate out where he gets right back on the wheel of the person coming out. And doing that over and over and over again, if you have 50 turns, that's probably too many. If you know, the amount of turns that happens inside of a race, then he saves a whole bunch of acceleration. So instead of accelerating to 800 watts, he accelerates to 600 watts. And that really adds up. You can imagine doing a TrainerRoad workout and turning it down 200 watts, how much more punch you'll have later on in the workout. And the other one is just, Amber, you said this too, but just, it's like where you line up way before the corner. Mm-hmm. That's the most important part. And you kind of like, maybe even 3 corners ahead of time, you think about where you want to be in the pack, because you kind of get stuck in there, especially if it's not strung out, if it's grouped up. And then to hit that really important corner where everyone accelerates out at the right section. I'm thinking of Land Park. We've all raced Land Park, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
There's that really tight corner, and that's really depends on where you're at about how much you accelerate out of it and how easy it is. And that's I don't know how many laps that is, but it makes a huge difference to that little thing. I've also gapped it where I gap, and they go the same speed as me, and now I just have a bigger gap to make up. Where like you gap yourself over and over again. That's not recommended. So don't do that.
I think that there's a lot of, so this is really appropriate for the race analysis coming up, by the way. So stay tuned for that. When there's a really big field, things change because like you said, Nate, kind of like sagging, that doesn't work as much when you're in a really big field, because if it's 100%. Like 100 riders and then you're at the back of the 100 rider group, it takes laps to get up toward the front in that 100 rider group. So if you do get to a point where you can sag like that and move forward, then you're probably really far back, which in a small group, 50 riders or less, it's no problem. But if it's in a group that's, really big, because like at Tulsa, if I had done that, if I had eased up at all, then 3 riders would have just filled the gap instantly. Right. So if I had come off a wheel at all, it just instantly got filled because everybody's practicing what Amber is saying is get those bars in front. And if you have those bars in front, then you can control. One thing I have to remind myself is to not get frustrated by what you were saying, Amber, when I'm in the race and it's not the ideal line. I'm such a line nerd, if there is such a thing, but like, I want to take the perfect line from motocross to skiing to mountain biking. It's always about the good lines, right? And that's like how my brain works. And it's really frustrating when I can't do that. And it's also really tempting to be like, why is everybody slowing down? Like, instead of frustrating yourself with why they are slowing down, they just are. The facts are what they are. That's what it is. And instead it's what you do with them. Right. And I can't change that. I can't yell out to the peloton and say, hey, everybody, we don't have to brake here. That's not going to change anything. Right. So instead it's really, so much of it is about keeping your cool, because like what's talked about here, if you are frustrated, things start happening really fast and you start to miss crucial moves. You start to lose all of your nuance and your fluidity within the group when you get frustrated. So it can cause a lot of problems.
Right. If you're imagining that there's a possibility, if you're imagining that you should be able to take the perfect line, even if you're in the middle of a bunched up group, then you're going to start to get really down on yourself pretty fast. And that's just going to spiral and it's not going to help anything. But like you said, I think you need to adjust those expectations to understand that these are the constraints that everybody in the field is facing. Everybody. Mm-hmm. And like he mentioned, everybody except the person on the front and except the person on the back, which is where you don't want to be anyway. So it's just adjusting your mindset to say, okay, this is a matter of degree. And what are my priorities here? Priorities in a race, positioning. And some of that will help with your momentum, right? Because if you're in the top 10, third of the field, then maybe top 10 riders or third of the field, depending on the size of the field, you're going to be able to carry more momentum, even if you're smushed into the middle of the group. Mm-hmm. But again, your priority needs to be your position, not necessarily carrying, not necessarily speed in the way that it would be if you were riding by yourself. And I think this is just a good analogy for racing in general, because there are so many things in a race you can't control, which on the one hand can be really frustrating, but on the other hand, that's what makes the racing fun, because it forces you to be present. It forces you to be paying attention, to respond, and to respond tactically in the moment. And that's what racing is all about. That's the difference between racing and going out training. So cornering is the same exact thing, in the sense that it's not going to be what it is when you're training, because you're not in control of what's happening, but you're going to exercise what degree of control you do have in order to maximize your chances of being in good position.
I feel like the Venn diagram of people who get upset at people like the peloton for, oh, you're not taking a good line, everyone hit the brakes, and then people who complain about people in traffic. It's raining, no one knows how to drive. Why is everyone slowing down? There's no reason to slow down. Totally. It's like the same exact way. When it's the same thing as everyone's just reacting to what already happened, and everyone who you're yelling at, it's just because everyone else is in front of them is slow. They have no choice. They want to go faster too. It's just the way it is. And the yelling does not, it just makes you frustrated to both your points. It doesn't help.
Chad, you've had a lot of experience racing with like very skilled fields, because in your era of racing in NorCal in particular, in his era of racing here in NorCal, we had very high performing athletes, right? Like the 1-2 fields when Chad was racing, they were legit 1-2 fields, like really strong. Yes. And very experienced also. Like you had a lot of recently retired pros that were just racing as 1-2s, right? And so anyways, Chad, your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, no, that's accurate too, because I would line up at so many races and just look across the front line, the people who are positioned best, ready to really get after it. And you'd see so many stars and bars, so many little sleeves that are ringed with that national champs emblem. And right there, you could get in your head immediately. But it's funny, you guys talk about what it's like to ride in a pack, and outside of twilight races, and even those string out too. I'm used to it stringing out fast. And it's what we kind of touched on earlier, where if you have the fitness, it's fun. And if you don't, you're just clinging for dear life, and it sucks the whole time. You're just like, why am I even bike racing? What am I doing wrong? I'm not having fun. I'm not going to have fun at any point over the course of this race. But normally I brought a pretty high level of fitness to it, so I could be amongst the early riders, and it would be fun. But it was so commonly strung out. I didn't have a lot of time in big groups unless it was a big stage race or something, and the rollout was soft. But even then, we weren't going that fast, so those things didn't really matter.
It gets even more complex if you have a course that's turning left, right, left, right, left, right. Or it just constantly turning too, even in one direction. But it's much more complex when you're going left to right, because then you have this really complicated shuffling that's always going on, and you really have to work for it. So, the one thing I can say, like Amber said, there's no secret to suddenly making you exceptional to the rest of the group. Right. It's just you follow the fishies. I like that saying. But then if you do position yourself toward the front third, it's easier. It's less complicated. Now, if you're in a relatively small group, in this case, Florian, like 40 racers or less, something like that, you can probably do what Nate was talking about and let yourself go to the back there, and that will smooth it out, and it will be much better. And that can be really helpful. But also, if it's a bigger group, or if it's a race where that things are going to go off the front and stick, then put yourself in that front third. And even though it seems like a little bit more work to be there, it might be more beneficial if that course is constantly surging, shuffling, and it's really difficult to hold your position. Yeah, Chad.
Well, and kind of along the lines of what Amber was talking about, where you talk down to yourself about, I didn't take the best line through that because the group forced me into a line I didn't want to take. And that can beat you up over the course of it. That kind of applies to being off the front or being off the back too. He talks about not wanting to be in front, not wanting to be in back. Those aren't necessarily bad places to be. It's a long race. Sometimes you might be up front, and don't criticize yourself for it. Don't think I need to get out of here as fast as possible because I'm just hemorrhaging energy. And when you're off the back, don't criticize yourself thinking I'm never going to catch up with these guys. They're too fast. There's so much room to make up. Those are places you'll probably end up over the course of, 30, 40, 60 minutes.
For sure. Yeah. And the worst thing you could do, like you said, is just panic and get really down on yourself. It's just kind of like, okay, take a breath, collect yourself, make some moves.
If you really hate this type of racing too, race masters when you're old enough. The difference in like speed in corners and accelerations, it's so much easier or better in masters races. Everyone's just, I think the skill level is much higher just because they've probably been riding for a lot longer, and they don't tend to freak out as much, I think, inside of corners and stuff. And it's pretty nice. Chad, was that your experience too?
Very much so. Yeah. I remember being at Tour de Nez way back in the day. And I first started, I always watched the race, and I wanted to race it someday, and it was a masters race, and I wasn't old enough. But then they opened it up to the pros, and I aged up anyway. So I raced masters, but I taught spin classes or bike classes of some sort. And one of the riders had watched our masters race, and then the pros were lining up, and she was near me, and she looked at me and she said, now we're going to watch the guys who don't touch the brakes. And I was just like, woman, you have no idea. That masters ride just now was super clean. There was no unnecessary braking, in the top 10, 15 riders, whatever. But that's when it really settles in. P12s, yes, they're very good at it, but some of them are just strong, and they're not particularly good bike handlers, and they don't have that firm a grasp on these things. But man, you do that for 10, 15, 20 years, you understand that stuff really well.
Then you have kids and a career and everything else. You want to go home and be okay after the race.
In your own car, not in an ambulance.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, recapping, it is the way it is to a certain extent. Don't panic, don't freak out, don't get upset or frustrated. And if you want to minimize that effect of having to surge and struggle and fight for position yourself in favorable spots. If it's a bigger field, you might want to get toward the front third. If it's a smaller field, you can also choose the back and then slingshot past people if you need to, and absorbs kind of the hit that Nate was talking about. So,
sorry,
yeah,
he mentioned that he's really comfortable moving up on the straights. That's great. Move up on the straights and then maintain your position through the corner, and then move up on the next straight and maintain your position through that corner. You don't necessarily need to be making up position in the corners. So I think positioning is the key, and don't worry about learning bad habits just because this is a Cat 4 race. What you're learning is how to respond to the racers around you, and that's going to serve you in everything that you do moving forward in bike racing. So I think that this is kind of a no-lose situation. You can always learn something.
For
John,
sure.
before we move on, I have a big announcement. They're installing my AC unit right now. It's the one that got stolen.
That's right. Somebody stole it.
So like
That's
a giant
amazing.
house one. I was like, wow, my room's hot. And they just stole the whole thing. The building that we have has 4 of them, so it was okay. And I had just had a mini
office.
split installed for my office. Yeah. And that's what, this is not my house right here. But there might be noise or something. I don't know what's going on, but it's to not have AC when it's 100 degrees outside is the whole house.
It's a little brutal.
Yeah. So anyways.
It's been yesterday in here looking at my watch. It was 92 degrees in the office and I was recording a Successful Athletes podcast. I was just sweating through my shirt. So look forward to that.
That room has the AC of this unit hits your room. So that's why it'll be better. And I looked through and all the units, we need to get this fixed, but the cool was set to like 82 in here. I don't know.
I saw that.
I did not do that.
I was just melting. Cool. So heat training. That's all we're doing. William says, hey team, and this is Chad, this is going to be the deep dive. This is a great question that I'm sure a lot of us have thought about. William says, is the kilojoule to kilocalorie conversion ratio, which usually when people are looking at that, actually, Chad, I'll let you work that through.
Yeah,
I'll just read the question. You're the smart guy here. So is the kilojoule to kilocalorie conversion ratio consistent over the different energy systems? In other words, are our bodies as efficient at low intensity work as they are at high intensity work? Thanks, from William.
Yep. It's crazy how these short questions yield such long responses, but this is one of them. First off, let me do just a touch of housekeeping. So on the last podcast a couple of weeks ago, I made the comment that 99% of athletes can still lift their FTP without lifting their VO2 max. And I totally stand by that. 99% is probably an exaggeration, but the point is most. What I want to make clear is that I was not implying that VO2 max, or rather your power at VO2 max or your aerobic capacity, however you want to view it, isn't a concern or that it isn't trainable, because it absolutely is. And every ramp test kind of bears that out. You probably see at least a little bit of a bump in your VO2 max, a little bit of a bump in your FTP. Ideally, those things are happening concurrently. What I was trying to convey is that our cycling economy and or efficiency, which is what we're going to talk about today, hasn't yet been maximized. So by all means, raise both. I want your FTP to go up. I want your power at VO2 max or your VO2 max itself to go up, all these things. But for all these riders who think that they have a frozen FTP or that they've plateaued, today I'm going to make it abundantly clear, I hope, is that changes in efficiency are still on the table for just about everybody. And I do think that's 99, probably 0.9% of athletes. Okay, so William, to your question. First off, I despise you and I love you. First, you're going to make me talk about maybe my least favorite topic in all of exercise science. And we've covered this before and it's baffling every time. I think I made a little more sense of it this time. I liken this to discussions on keto. I mean, they're both just things I just don't want any part of, but I'm gonna bear down and try to offer something useful today. So to your first question, a kilocalorie or a big C calorie is just a unit of energy equivalent to 4.1868 kilojoules. And kilojoules are just another unit of energy. So that's going to stay constant. And if you remember, a joule is a watt per second. So if you do 1 watt for 1 second, that's 1 joule. That's a tiny amount of energy. So we typically speak in terms of kilojoules. It's more relevant. So the kilojoule to kilocal, big C calorie with a big C, is used to estimate our caloric spend. And this is where I think the confusion creeps into it, because we're effectively determining the amount of food energy. And that's maybe the term that will help this make more sense that we're using. And in order to calculate that, we multiply it. I think at TrainerRoad, we use the 22% or whatever it may be as an estimate, because our mechanical efficiency as humans is poor. About the far majority of our food energy is dissipated as heat. We've talked about that a lot. So
can I just
really,
say that, Chad, I'm gonna do you mind if I jump in on that?
Sure.
So what Chad just said is when you are pedaling, for the calories that you're burning, only 22% of that is going to the actual pedals. The rest is everything else that's going on. It gets dissipated as heat. Which is, so if you were like 80, 90% efficient, you would be the fastest, you would win every world record in the world. And not even be that trained, right? Because if I was at 330, I'd be like, I'd triple my FTP.
Yeah.
It'd be insane, right?
If you could be at 30%,
FTP.
if you could be at 30%, you'd be that. I mean,
not even that, even 23%, right, Chad? Because
sort of,
not me,
sort of,
because to a certain extent, though, I just want to cover this point. Because like you said, efficiency is still up for grabs for many athletes, right? And when we look at this, if you look at the tour, and I know none of us are racing. Oh, not none of us. Tade is definitely listening right now. But for most of us here, we're not racing. That's right. Yeah. mid sprint. But we're probably not racing the tour. But if you look at a lot of your races, it's a lot of the time it's won. I mean, if it's a sprint finish, it's won by a fraction of a percent. You can't even measure it really. But it's the Tour de France is going to be won probably by less than 1% of the total time. And if you look in a lot of races, that 1% is a big difference. Now, I know we're talking about different variables here, different things, different outcomes, but a small increase in efficiency can have a profound effect on performance. Huge, so it's really like, I know that we're always tempted to just say, well, I just need 50 more watts and a big jump, but that small percentage difference can really make a difference on race day. So
the other interesting thing at the really high level athletes, they don't all have the same VO2 max or efficiency or ability to operate a threshold. It's like they'll be world class in different things. So one person will have a lower VO2 max, but exceptional efficiency. And that's why they're able to operate at that really high level. And someday there will be a person who's born who has all of those things. And that will be really interesting.
His name is Matthew Van Der Poel.
Person's been born. Yeah, they're out there. There's a few of them.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay,
Chad,
so as we're talking about, no apologies. About, if we're lucky, we're getting about a quarter of our output is actually making it to the pedals, is actually resonating or accomplishing mechanical work. This 22% was landed on because some paper way back targeted or gave a range of 18 to 26%. What's smack dab in the middle of that? Therefore, the average 22%. So that's where it stuck. What further science or further research has demonstrated is probably closer to 20, 22%. So maybe that puts the number down to 21%. But either way, we're talking about not even a quarter of the work we do makes it to the pedals. So the point here is you have to determine your food energy utilization. Okay, that's really what we're talking about. And in order to do that, we have to consider what we're going to talk about today is economy. So if we look at the pillars of endurance performance that we've mentioned a number of times, it's the three pillars, right? VO2 max, your fractional utilization, and economy. So let's talk about economy. If we look at it, and the automotive analogy is used quite often, and rightly so, it makes sense. It's miles per gallon or kilometers per liter, right? When it comes to athletes, we measure oxygen, and we typically look at it in milliliters or liters per watt or per mile per hour, kilometer per hour, if we're measuring velocity as we would in runners. Well, we're going to talk about cycling economy. So cycling economy basically boils down to how much oxygen is consumed when you're producing so many watts. So, and this ties directly to your question, William. Economy is almost always applied to sub-threshold work. And honestly, I didn't really come across why it only looks at sub-threshold. I mean, I can make some certain deductions, some assumptions, and I'm going to make one right now. It's most important at sustainable outputs. I mean, we only ride at high percentages of threshold for little periods of time. Are we really concerned with the efficiency over those little blips here and there? No, we want to know what happens when we're settled in and we're going to be there for a while. So that makes what I feel it makes economy most important is the sustainable workloads. So interestingly, the oxygen requirements can actually be calculated-ish, and I'll explain why ish. I was reading or I think it was a podcast or website, whatever, it doesn't matter. I was watching someone speak the other day, and he's a reputable resource. I've paid attention to the man for a long time, and he knows his stuff. And he said that it takes basically 12 milliliters of oxygen per minute to make a watt. So if you multiply that out, you're looking at 1.2 liters per minute for 100 watts, 2.4 for 200, 3.6 for 300, 4.8 for 400. And this is probably a very good small ballpark number, right? It's going to get us close. And in most cases, it's going to be all we ever need. But athletes can produce power without oxygen too, right? I mean, anaerobic glycolysis. So we can make energy, make work without utilizing oxygen. Excuse me. So riding at 400 watts isn't always going to mean that you're uptaking, consuming 4.8 liters of oxygen, but it can. You just have to account for RER, which is that respiratory exchange ratio that we have to measure, with a mask that measures both the oxygen in and the carbon dioxide out. And an example of where that number might fall on the 0 to 1 scale is 0.9. 0.9 telling us that we've veered away from the 0.7 where we're predominantly metabolizing fat, more toward the 0.1 where we're predominantly metabolizing carbohydrate. So it's a scale. And different RERs, different 0 to 1 figures mean different percentages of fuel are being utilized at the moment. So why is that useful to us? And I think a seminal study that's been referred to many times way back in 1988 from Andrew Coggin and Ed Coyle looked at 14 well-trained male cyclists. And all these guys had VO2 max on the absolute side between 4.6 and 5 liters per minute. So that put them right in the mid 60s to low 70s. So well-trained, not stellar, but certainly well-trained. 7 of these athletes, so half of them reached their lactate thresholds, and let's just call it FTP because it's close enough for what we're talking about right here, at about 66% of their VO2 max. The other 7 of them didn't hit VO2 or didn't hit their FTP or lactate threshold until about 82% of their VO2 max. That's a 16% difference. That's massive in riders who are very similar. So that 66% group was already making a big anaerobic contribution at only 2/3 of their VO2 max. So less efficient use of that incoming oxygen. So consider the endurance impact here. And they did. They had them ride, all of them, at 88% of their VO2 max. And what happened? The 66% group lasted for about 30 minutes. The 82% group, 60 minutes. That's sort of twice as long. That was the difference in this particular set of riders' endurance. So the anaerobic contribution was minimized in that 82% because they had made better utilization of the oxygen. They had greater aerobic capacity, less anaerobic metabolism, less lactate production, less blood and muscle acidity or a lower acidity. So if I understand that this greater endurance is due simply to higher economy because their FTP occurred at drastically different percentages of their VO2 max. So the point is you could have similar VO2 maxes, but very different abilities to use oxygen. So on the one hand, we got riders who are burning through their anaerobic stores versus the other riders who are minimally touching them. So as I see it, and give me a bit of leeway here, that economy could almost be defined as a greater preservation of your anaerobic stores. It's one way to view it.
Yeah.
The bigger point, though, is that both of the groups were consuming the same volume of oxygen, but the aerobically fitter athletes were doing far more work with theirs. Economy. So they were more efficient. They exhibited greater economy. So while we're on the topic, and since I've already done it several times, economy versus efficiency. These terms are used almost interchangeably. And in the context of most conversations, that's not a problem. Just leave it be. It doesn't need to be dissected. But if you want to look into it a little deeper and try to delineate, well, come along with me and I'll give you my best guess at it because I haven't got it figured out yet, but I think I'm getting a little closer. Economy seems to be the broader definition. Okay, so it's quite simply the velocity for runners, the power for riders produced for the energy expended. Okay, so power to energy, power out to energy and whatever. Well, efficiency, man, it appears to have many types, and I'm not entirely sure that's true because I saw the terms metabolic efficiency, gross efficiency, aerobic efficiency, muscular efficiency. There were others, and they all seem to be the same thing. It's mechanical work performed relative to energy expended. Same damn thing. So I don't know why I don't quite get it. And to add more confusion to this whole confusing situation already is that different researchers will define it differently in their studies. So I don't even know that it's agreed upon. I don't know how you do a review over this sort of thing. So for us, economy is going to be our umbrella term, and it's going to cover all manner of efficiency. So that metabolic efficiency, which covers things like core temperature, your fiber type, which is going to have a genetic component and is also the topic for my next deep dive, substrate utilization. So, how much fat are you using, how much carbohydrate you're using. It's going to cover respiratory efficiency. So your VO2 max, your heart rate, your ventilation, biomechanical efficiency, anthropometric measures, right? Limb lengths, body lengths, things like that. Again, big genetic component, pedaling style, flexibility, neuromuscular efficiency, the neural signaling, how well does your brain communicate with the muscle fibers, motor patterns, force production. All of these have potential influences on your economy or cycling economy, as we're talking about.
If you would upped each one of those by a fraction of a percent, it would have a profound impact on the athlete that you become.
It'd be measurable. I fully believe that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about measuring economy. And specifically, we'll look at the units of measurement. So when it comes to running economy, that's typically expressed in milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute. So just like VO2 max, right? Relative to some speed. So at 10 miles per hour or 16 kilometers per hour, how much oxygen are you consuming? Cycling economy seems to be, and this carried across the studies that I looked at, is watts per liter of oxygen per minute. So an example of this is 7 pro cyclists were looked at. They rode at 385 watts and they ranged from 4.8 to 5.1 liters per minute at that 385 watts, which already demonstrates that even at the same watts, differing oxygen consumption, so different levels of efficiency. So cycling economy really is just how much oxygen does it take you to produce 150 watts, 200 watts, 400 watts, and any reduction in the power output relative to the oxygen you're consuming yields a higher efficiency. So if we take this back around to those endurance performance pillars that I talked about earlier, as I see it, your capacity is your VO2 max, right? That's the roof of the house, and that sets the limit. But within that limit, your cycling efficiency can change how that capacity is utilized. And in doing so, it'll actually affect your fractional utilization. So all those three pillars are all coalescing or always affecting one another to some extent. So the question here is, how greatly can this particular pillar impact performance? And the example I'm going to cite, yes, it's a running example, but it illustrates this perfectly, and we've already kind of touched on it. As you look at Paula Radcliffe back in the early 90s and early 2000s, so about an 11-year span, study by Andy Jones a few years later in 2006, looked at the relationship between VO2 max and race times, finding that her VO2 max held constant across this 11-year span, hovered right around 70. But she got faster and faster and faster, and eventually set a world record in the marathon, which I'm pretty sure she's still second in that standing, and only by a fraction of or a portion of a minute. So while there was no correlation between her VO2 max and her faster and faster times, there was a distinct correlation between her times and her economy, a strong one. What Andy Jones found, is that she increased her running economy, which led to the faster times and eventually the world record by 15% over this 11-year span. Whoa. Which is massive. She's already a high-level athlete, already, turning in ridiculously fast times. So even at the highest end of things, there's still room for improvements in efficiency. Sobering fact is that it's going to take a high VO2 max and a high level of economy to set world records. But, more encouragingly and more relevant to most of us is that all three of these pillars are very trainable. Mm-hmm. And more encouragingly is that a weakness in one, just like Nate said, can be compensated for with strengths in the other. You have a low VO2 max, big deal. Increase your fractional utilization, push that FTP up to a higher percentage of it, increase your economy. Okay. So how do we increase economy?
What's interesting, though, too, about the Paula Radcliffe world record is when it was broken, it was like, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? It was in Chicago.
It's recent,
I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it happened, they had she had vapor flies, too. Not to take anything away from that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if Paula Radcliffe had
certain
vapor
advantages.
flies during the same time, yeah, because that's like a 1% to 2%, I think, increase. And that is
Sure.
the Nike shoe with the carbon plate in it that has a much, very controversial, but that is in Chip, I can never say his name. Kipchoge. He had a very, on his record, he had a one with 3 plates in it, like a crazy one. But that does, that really small increase. So just super props to Paula Radcliffe for.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's not a level playing field. And her deficit was not even a minute. So Yeah,
I know. It'd be interesting to see. But who knows, right? Same thing with all world records. You're like, oh, now you have faster tires now or better aerodynamics and nowadays.
Yeah.
That's the nature of it. Okay, so back to how do we train economy? So an easy way to imagine how you might train your economy is to look at the factors affecting economy. So what's your training history? You've been at this for a couple of years, you've been at this for a couple of decades. What type of exercise are you doing? Long, slow miles, you hit intervals, combination of the two, whatever. What training phase are you in? Basically ties to what I just said. The quantity of training or your training volume, the level of fatigue in your body that particular day, the surface of the terrain that you're riding on. And as much as I don't want to talk about it, your diet. So, and I'm going to put this in here because I know that some poor soul's going to have to deal with this on the forum. So it won't be me. So let me try to help you out. So if you're a carbohydrate centric eater versus a fat centric eater, you're going to yield different RERs. There's different substrate utilization going on, right? You have different enzymes that are going to help you metabolize one of those fuels over the other because that's what you're feeding your body all the time. So the same power output will have different fuel percentages, different efficiency, but this is not automatically a win. Being more economical at subthreshold paces, meaning that you have more power output per milliliter of oxygen consumed, comes with certain expenses. We've talked about this. You lose your high end. Your repeatability, especially high end repeatability, can suffer. Your ability to metabolize carbohydrate suffers. So greater economy doesn't always translate to higher levels of performance. You can improve your economy, but not necessarily get faster, not perform better. In some cases, that's just the opposite. It can happen, but the assumption is that if I can metabolize oxygen better because I have a higher fat diet, I'm going to be faster. That doesn't carry. Okay, so how do we affect it? First and foremost, and this is widely agreed upon, strength training, because it does so many good things for you. First off, it increases your force capacity. So how many muscle
This
fibers
is why you watch
can
on
you recruit?
YouTube. Nate just gave us a strongman flex. So
I didn't really give it the real gun show, but just a little bit.
No, it's real.
Don't make me break these out, Nate says. Yeah.
Even that upper body stuff has utility, and I'll explain that. But so greater force capacity. You can push on the pedals harder. You can recruit more muscle fibers. You improved your motor patterns, which is basically coordination, and that's a huge deal. And it actually seems to have a greater impact than increasing maximal force. So your 1 second power versus how coordinately you turn the pedals is probably more.
What was that word?
Science
Coordinatedly?
says. I don't know. I'm pretty sure.
We all understand it, Nate. But you bring up such a good point, right, Chad? Like when you try to do sprints for the first time in the year, you're just like, you feel like you're going to fall off your bike. It's so awkward. And then you do more and more of it, and suddenly it just becomes second nature, and you get way more for a given amount of effort.
Some people. Not all people.
We've all
Nate,
seen the video.
Now that you're like upper body jacked, what if you sprint incredibly well?
I don't think I will, because I should try it, but my front chainring too is popping off the front when I go hard, so I don't want to sprint at the moment. I need to get that fixed. But
just fix that.
Yeah.
It is I forgot. Oh, no, I've never been able to really unlock my full strength when I sprint. I'm like loosey goosey, and you've seen the sprint video, so I hope that that happens. We'll see. Yeah, look at an 1800 watt sprint.
I think that's more of a coordination matter right there. So that's exactly what we're talking about. You've got a ton of force, but you just can't apply it in a coordinated enough manner, to make it useful, to make it propel you. Instead, you just kind of flounder side to side.
It's horrible. It's like
every post conversation now is going to be like, guys, I have so much force. It's just not able to use it all.
So much. Yeah. It's like a drag car on bicycle tires. He's just spinning around. So sorry, Chad, we derailed you with flexing and all sorts of terrible things.
That's okay. We're still on strength training. So one of the other benefits of strength training is stability. So think of that just in terms of less wasted movement. So better transfer of power to the pedals. Strength training can also help you iron out imbalances. So if you think of these wasteful compensatory patterns that we pick up because, our hips are a little canted and we don't recognize it, and one leg's a little stronger than the other, whatever it may be. If you do single leg exercises, it'll help you flesh this out. They're also referred to as unilateral exercises. They're especially good for this. Flexibility work obviously can help too. If one leg's tighter than the other, they're going to ride differently. That's probably going to cost you. some efficiency.
Chad, if I could just throw in an Amber point, I bet this went through your head, Amber, because you mentioned it before, but those sort of single leg exercises and the sort of stuff where you're not trying to leg press, 600 pounds with one leg, but it's simple stuff like Bulgarian split squats, even without weights. They build a level of proprioception as well that really goes a long way with that coordination side of things, right? And
big time.
That's such a huge, because what you're doing on the bike is constant unilateral exercise. You're constantly doing that. And that proprioception of the fine tuning of balance and nerve control when you're doing that, it's just so cool. It helps a ton. So I notice a direct correlation when I stop strength training to me wondering what's wrong on the bike when I'm descending, mountain biking or doing anything, or not feeling like I can sprint well. It's not because I'm getting big muscles. It's because I'm fine tuning those coordination points. So
right.
It's huge.
And now Chad's enlightening as to exactly what the mechanism is by which this actually makes you feel so much better.
Yep. Okay. So strength training first and foremost, and seriously heads the list every time, because the other alternatives, well, the first one's ride lots, and that just depends on how much time you have to dedicate to it. So you gotta grease that groove, right? This is especially visible in runners, where there are tons of studies that tie economy to the number of years runners have run, the number of miles they've accumulated, and there are quite a few cycling studies that do the same thing. Look at the pro level cyclists who have competed for 3 years versus those who have competed for 5 years, and there's a distinct measurable difference. So, okay. And the next in line, technique. So if we look at technique through the oxygen cost lens, perhaps it'll resonate a bit more with some people. The idea of mashing and bouncing versus spinning fluidly. I mean, just picture it in your head. Which one do you think is more efficient? The one who's, glued to the saddle, Geraint Thomas style, just motoring along, looking like he's not doing any work at all? Or I can't even think of his name.
Don't say it.
The Crab way back when. Oh, it's an older rider, but he rode horribly and he was fast. But imagine if he was just a bit more coordinated, a bit less oxygen costly. And then just what about the tension that you carry? My workout text is always telling you drop your shoulders, loosen your grip, soften your elbows, etc., because that's costing you oxygen. So some of the oxygen that's coming through your body is going to those tense, unutilized muscles. So let it go.
John and I saw this live when Chad did his RER test, where he had the mask on, and he could see the RER live of fat versus carbs. And he would look at it, and then you'd see him drop his shoulders and relax, and it would shift down to more fat in the middle of his test. And then he would they'd up the watts, and then he relaxed a little more, and he would actually put it back down to where it was at a lower watt level. Live on while he was riding.
Yeah.
Chad, you may not remember this, but this has stuck in my head. And this always
Nate and I were shocked. Yeah,
I know. The tester was shocked too. I don't think most people try to relax like that, and Chad is aware of it. I just think of a long race. Yeah. If I'm tense, you get so excited, right, in a race. Yeah. Rather than being loosey goosey, and that's talk about these small. Sorry, Chad. Talking about these small changes, but this is something that everyone can do. Is just relax and have a drop shoulders and take some deep breaths, and you could burn more fat and then thus have more anaerobic stores later. It's crazy.
No, that dovetails into exactly the point I was going to make.
Yeah, Super Saiyan level relaxation over there by Chad. So it's incredible. He's elevated. Oh, it's just a Dragon Ball Z reference, but he's he's elevated to the next level, basically. Chad's able to just control all things and within him. It's pretty cool. So,
but to your point, Nate, this is one way to all of these things contribute to managing fatigue, which is often enough, in fact, pretty much all the time, a key concern. So doing all these things, riding more in a more coordinated manner, not coordinatedly, help us postpone that wasteful, those deteriorating mechanics that only grow worse, right? So the idea is that greater economy means lower utilization of those anaerobic resources, those finite energy sources, less muscle stress, slower rate of fatigue, which leads to a less rapid slip in mechanics over the course of really any duration. I mean, just think of a 3-minute VO2 max push, where you start out super fluid during the first minute, second minute, you're just kind of hanging in there. And then the third minute, wheels start to come off the wagon, right? But if you could just rein that back in and ride as smoothly as you did in the first minute, I promise you, your oxygen costs would come down. So to restate this, strength train, increase your mileage if you have that option, even if it's just once every 6, 8, 10 days, whatever it may be, and work on your technique, and all of those things. And then finally, William, let me just tidy this up by saying that I can see many ways we'd be less efficient at higher intensities, but because they're so short-lived, I'm not sure it's of great concern. Doesn't appear to be so in the research, not with coaches, and probably not with athletes.
Super interesting deep dive on that, Chad. And it's probably something that I feel like if I could add to your restated suggestions, patience as well is one, is that this does take time to build. And with time, you'll just get better and better. And that's also, that's why Amber got to experience that firsthand, being a professional cyclist and dedicating so much time to it for so many years. And, you build that sort of ability to be able to be successful in the group later on. And it's a combination of all things. Amber's so great at breaking down a race and understanding what needs to happen. And that also aids the efficiency, helps you relax. So
experience really helps. And like Chad said, adding, riding more, but if you can't ride more and you're kind of worried about like, do I really have to race for 10 years to get all this? No, paying attention and being really mindful of everything that you are actually doing will go a really, really long way. So like Chad said, there's multiple ways of building your economy. It's not just one. So if one of those avenues isn't as available to you as the others, focus on those others really well and be really, really mindful about how you're executing them.
For sure.
Don, we kind of buried the lead too again on this one.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, you have a air fryer now.
Well, we're in the rapid fire section. So yeah, we should cover that. Yep.
Sometime.
Rapid fire commences. I have an air fryer. I've been air frying things. My life is changing. I don't have 2 yet, Nate. I haven't quite reached that level.
You have 2 drawers though. So that's that's the same
sweet
thing.
Yeah. It's next level. It's fantastic. Simon's eating all sorts of vegetables. He picked out an eggplant at the store the other day, and because it has fantastic texture, he ate the whole thing. He loved it. So, there you go. As I said before,
life, John,
Nate's right. Yes, Nate's right. And then I just have to, it just takes me too long to get there.
It's it's the ferocity of the telling me I'm wrong, which gets to me. And then he buys it later.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. So Brian's question is a bit dated. We were going to cover this last week, but then things happened. We weren't able to record last week. So we apologize for that. But I'm sure you do, Chad. Real tough to answer these ones. So he says, Latour is here. Who's going to win the men's race? Can we just guess that really quick, all of us? I think
all indications is Pogačar.
Yeah, if Tadej Pogačar doesn't win this race, it's because something big went wrong, right? I would think.
Yeah. So he's firing on all cylinders. He doesn't have a weak link right now, except maybe his team is partially injured. That's like the worst thing he's got going for him.
Whereas Jumbo-Visma is like a 2-man team now, basically. I think that didn't get
spoiler alert. I haven't seen the tour at all yet.
Well, that's your fault at this point, Nate. We're not going to talk about today's stage, but yeah.
Well, I haven't been training. I watch it on the bike. I'm going to watch. Yeah. I guess I don't even know stage 1. The prologue.
You can just listen to this very rapid fire section where we talk about it, Nate.
Okay.
But the thing is, this is kind of rough to say, but like he and Carapaz, they were the only ones that didn't make it through, or that didn't get truly compromised in the crashes. And as a result, they have the best chance, I think, in a big way. So I don't know. I'm curious to see, but who's going to win?
The fact that he put in the time trial that he did is such a stamp of authority. I know it's cliche to say, but man, this is a time trial laden tour, and he's already shown that Nate is the fastest TTer out there.
Yeah. Which blows my mind, by the way, because he's a relatively small rider, right? Like it's just crazy to see him do so well in the TT. I wonder if he would have beat Filippo Ganna. But anyways, who's going to win? Who's going to win the? Oh yeah, Nate, go ahead.
One, when the tour is on, our live listens go down a ton. 2, we just have to say that we do know Chad has a little bit of ring in his microphone. You don't need to email in. And Chad, try putting it directly, like so close to your mouth, like extra close. Like
okay. And then turning your game down.
Is that better?
No,
it's not.
No.
So talk some more, Chad.
Testing.
This is great podcast audio right here.
Vanderbreggen was my pick for the women's course.
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a bit.
Little bit.
Yeah. Gain down a touch and we'll be set.
Man, I keep
Amber, how
dropping
about
my
you
game.
for the women's race? Who do you think would win?
I haven't been following, guys.
You've got bigger fish to fry. Which, speaking of, actually, how are you doing with? You're getting close, right? Closer to your due date.
Yeah. So guest date is August 22nd, and bodybuilding program is going well so far. This little body I'm making is getting bigger.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a wild ride, that's for sure.
Yeah. Demi Vollering, when she won that race, I'm not surprised to see her do really well. She's so darn good, but I have a hard time voting against Vanderbreggen. She's just so good. So,
Yep.
Okay.
She's
Next one. How many stages will Matthew Vanderpool win? As many, I don't know. I have no clue if he's winning today, but he's going to drop out soon anyway, because he's going to go win Olympic gold in mountain biking because he's Matthew Vanderpool.
Say 2.
And yeah, when Cav wins the stage, will it be the most popular stage win ever?
Easily.
I don't know. That's pretty popular. So
Yeah, the MBDP win was very emotional, but the Cav one was too, especially if you've been watching cycling for more than a decade.
Also, everybody that's saying that, like, all you haters were doubting Cav, I never doubted Cav. Cav doubted Cav, and he admitted that on the podium. So
Everyone.
don't, yeah. So like,
Aw.
so and so it's super cool win. Super cool to see. And Froome won't get a sneaky stage win since he won't be a GC contender. That's the other question. But I just wanted to talk about this really quick. Did you see the way in which Vanderpool won when he attacked? I think it was 4 attacks that he did in that final one to go. I just so badly want to see what's going on inside that human's body to make that happen. Cause like he attacked, the field was already, it was getting skinny at the front, right? Like the riders were getting sent off, and he attacks. And then he sees that there's like 12 riders with him. He looks, and he already looks like he's exploding. And he looks back and he attacks again. And then he sees that it's a handful of riders. He looks back, he attacks again, and then he attacks again to spit everybody off. It was one of the most impressive, like, dig deep sort of things I think I've ever seen. I don't know how he did that. So they said he did over 500 watts for something at the end. It was like minutes.
Something?
At the end.
Yeah. So there's
the amazing stats.
There's the example of what we were talking about. All 3 pillars. It's all there.
Yeah.
No weak links. Yeah.
What an incredible athlete. So, okay. From Liam, he says, Jonathan, I think I'm right in saying you're the only podcast regular that uses rollers instead of a turbo trainer. During the winter, I had about 6 weeks of indoor training only on the watt bike. When I first took my road bike for an outside ride, I couldn't believe how twitchy I felt. I was thinking if I was using rollers during this time, would this have happened? Honestly, it would have happened as well. When I get outside after riding on the rollers, I still feel twitchy as heck. So that's just the way it goes. It's a different, you get used to it. But it's also a really quick adaptation period that you'll go through. So I don't think that rollers make me somehow feel like I'm riding outside. They're completely different to that. I get that question a lot. I'm thinking of changing my Strava name to, yes, I use rollers on my workouts. So Marius says, are there real aero gains from shaving your legs? Yes. Check out the Specialized Wind Tunnel. And if yes, how far up do I shave? And how do I explain this to my wife? How far up is as much as you want. Yeah. But can we talk about this? Because we get questions from new cyclists that are embarrassed to ask about the leg shaving thing because they don't want to ask other people about it. How often they shave, or like, does everybody here use razors, or do they use Nair, or do they use anything else like that?
I use a little buzzer, like it's a mechanical one, and I don't get razor bumps, or else if I do, I get these like gross, like pimply things on my thighs, and they're gross. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't get perfectly smooth, but I think it's close enough that it is aerodynamic, and it's way easier too than shaving. Takes forever, especially if you're a guy. You got to clip first because it's really long hair. I mean, like that could happen with women too, but generally women keep their leg hair shorter. Yeah, that's what I do. But right now, man, they're hairy. I don't think I'm gonna shave them until Cape Epic.
It's sending a signal. Yeah, not ready to race quite yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I just need to do. I just need to like shave them today, and I'll be like Mr. 10 hours a week.
You're locked in.
Ready to go.
It's worth some watts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just use razor. I've tried Nair, and that like burns like crazy. It was so uncomfortable. So yeah, I just use a razor and I use shaving cream. I see a lot of people say like, well, why do you use shaving cream? Well, you don't need to. It's like, well, you don't not need to as well. And it's like pleasant to use shaving cream. So, but yeah. And then as far as explaining it to somebody, you don't have to explain that to anybody. Just if you want to shave your legs, it's fine. If you don't want to shave your legs, it's fine. It does make you faster aerodynamically speaking, but probably there are a whole lot of other spots where we can shave efficiency as well. I like it because it makes my legs look good. I like it because it makes it, hey, as you caught it. Nice one, Emery.
I do think the healing faster thing is legit though. I mean, not that you crash that often, but when you do crash and you don't have hair clouding the whole healing process, it takes place more quickly.
When you peel bandages off, it doesn't rip hair out every time. Yeah.
You can always just shave around it though. I mean, I've never liked that argument. I think it just looks like the culture.
Looks good.
Cyclist.
I like feeling my legs when they're shaved. I like feeling when they're hairy. I'm not afraid to admit it. So don't be afraid either, Marius. Own it.
On all the meetings, he just rubs his legs.
That's what I'm doing right now. Can't see. Barnaby says, my question is about electrolytes. I've read that the most important one is sodium and that you get everything else you need in sufficient quantities from food. So what's wrong with simply eating a really salty meal the night before a race? Is there anything special about salts taken in powder form as opposed to cooked into a meal? Nothing wrong with that at all, right, Nate? We've talked about that with Andy Blow a few times from Precision Hydration.
Yeah, probably. I wasn't listening, but I think you're going to pitch that to me. I was reading the live chat.
So Stacey Sims put forth that we get too much chloride when we take it in the form of sodium chlorides, table salt. So the proportion is just a little bit off. Yeah, and that's the worst of it. But she's also said that I think her homemade drink is maple syrup and a pinch of salt. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. It is clear that the sodium is the key electrolyte, and magnesium in a much lesser amount, and the same with potassium. So you just need kind of a dash of both of those. And I believe you could get those dietarily, no problem. But if we're talking about out on the ride, I think the bottle is a great place to get those things.
I get Precision Hydration 1500 tablets, so 1500 milligrams. It's a lot. It's salty. But I get those. And before, like the night before a race, I usually have one of those. And I use salt in my meal, sure, but I don't want to just dump a whole thing of salt on there. So I take those in before, and then I usually use throughout a race. I use the little blister packs they have of the little sodium capsules. And I take those in during an XCO race. I'm clearly not going to take time to work with a blister pack. So I'll just take in some salt beforehand with their 1500s. So that's how I do it there.
I think the extra effort comes into play when you're talking about really extreme conditions where it's extreme heat or extremely long or extremely hard effort or race. Then you might need a little bit more, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with that approach. I think that's a great approach, actually.
One of the best races to do that would be Kona, I think, because that first hour or two when you're swimming is the weight's not going to matter. And you're going to be sweating in the water, even though you don't think you are, to not come out as like low on fluid. And I think Scratch, I want to correct me if I'm wrong. I should Google it right now before I say it, but I think it's their like salt loading thing is like 4,000 milligrams the day before. Yeah. And you just can't do it too much before because you can get a rebound effect. So it has to be like the night before if you're going to do it. I think Scratch recommends the night before and the morning of, but it can also cause stomach discomfort. So make sure that you try that before, especially before an Ironman where kind of everyone wakes up and everybody's nervous. Even professional athletes who are ex-world champions are nervous too in the morning and their stomach gets upset. So no one is immune to that.
Yep. The other thing that I would say too is just remember sodium loading is not a replacement. Pre-sodium loading is not a replacement for sodium intake throughout the activity as well. So that was one thing. And once again, if you just Google Precision Hydration, Ask a Cycling Coach podcast, you'll find 2 episodes that we've recorded with Andy where he talks about that. So you want to be taking in some when you are racing, particularly in hot conditions. Okay. Tom's question. He says, I'm kind of tired of seeing leaderboards with groups of 10 who nailed a segment. If I go to the gym and my 10 friends and I work together to bench press 700 pounds, I can't quite claim I did it myself, can I? So maybe there should be 2 categories of KOM, solo and group. Sure, you can get stuck in the weeds worrying about whether a time was wind aided and air temperature, etc. But riding a segment solo would be the most important metric. You probably won't use this question since it involves talking smack about something else. But hey, inquiring minds want to know if I'm on my own here. It's a good question.
The biggest, so we live in Reno. You must not live in a windy area because our KOMs are, like 40, 50 mile per hour winds, you'll see these things, especially in like Washoe Valley in here, where somebody averages like 35 miles per hour for like 10 minutes by themselves. And like I think wind is a bigger factor, but you can't level set it. It's impossible.
You can't. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And the same thing with like motor pacing. Well, then like at that point, should you discount all KOMs that are involved in a race as well? Like where do you draw the line? Right. I think it's all fair game.
How do you police it?
Exactly. Yeah. It's all fair game. So windsurfing is absolutely the biggest thing for us.
There's websites to find like the correct wind days. Pretty much the only one, even a really steep climb, wind will impact a bunch, but not as much. Those are the ones where they're more based on the effort, where a group doesn't matter. But I almost feel like all flat things or things that could have a lot of wind impact, that's more, it's part strategy. Kind of get the fast group, kind of have the people there, do I have the right wind day? Is the temperature right? So like the barometric pressure is right. Like, because the hot days you'll be faster than cold days, but you can't be too hot because you'll be, it will limit you. It's even, there was a group in Reno who'd go out and they would like motor pace, they try to get KOMs and they do it. And they have
full
one
lead
person
out
sprint
train
at the end. Lead out train pretty much. Yeah. And they got a lot of KOMs.
Yeah. That's how it works. This is another reason why you don't want to put all of your self-worth, stock, and everything else into an outcome that just can't be controlled and it can be interfered with easily. You got to focus on the effort that you put into it. So
probably. I was just gonna say in this one, mindset's probably the most important factor. The KOMs are there for fun.
Yeah, fun. That's exactly what I was going to say. Is like if it's a bit of fun, but it's not fair competition, just a bit of fun.
Yeah, exactly. Chad, are you just slaying KOMs in your new area, your new hood up there? You claiming your turf?
Every time I look, it's just disappointing. So I try not to look.
Where are you percentage-wise in your area? For overall?
Oh man, I don't even remember. Way down. Yeah, but I'm not getting after them either. I don't really do the whole KOM thing. I just ride and then I look at the segments afterwards and it's typically
not even trying, everyone.
I'm not even trying, and I'm finishing
Y'all
like
just
800.
wait.
No big deal.
Cape Epic Chad's going to start smashing KOMs. So Mimi says, I came from a very unhealthy lifestyle and low fitness and cycling, but I finally found TrainerRoad workouts and I've seen my life turning around. I love the structure and the podcast. Good to hear, Mimi. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Mimi. I apologize if not. If VO2 max is an important phase of the fitness improvement, is there any other way to include VO2 max from a number perspective from the ramp test along with FTP? Since TrainerRoad has lots of VO2 max workouts that's supposed to help improve VO2 max, I'd like to be able to see that, but there is no way to know that I have that gain. I know Garmin has something similar on their app. Thanks again for everything. This is levels, right, Nate? Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's two different things. There's the VO2 max and power at VO2 max. And we don't have a way to measure VO2 max because you would need a mask and stuff like that. And Chad kind of mentioned it before, but I'd argue that it's not needed to train to know your actual VO2 max, but knowing your power at VO2 max and increasing that is very important. And the two can be kind of coupled a little bit. To do like a estimate of what your VO2 max would be, how you do that is you look at your performance and you look at like charts, right? And kind of like population level things. And because we don't know the efficiency or your fractal utilization, we can't really get your VO2 max. Chad just did a whole deep dive about why those could be different. So it would be a very big estimate of what it's kind of like estimating calories off of heart rate. That's kind of estimating VO2 max versus what your power is. You could probably get maybe kind of close, but not, there could be some really big outliers. And for us, I don't think it's meaningful enough metric in training, or like you would train your training, it would change your training enough. But as Jonathan said, athlete level. So if the level of, at a certain FTP, if the level of your VO2 max workouts are going up, your power at VO2 max is likely going up in the, and maybe even your VO2 max. And that's what's more important is relative, where are you going in your training and how are you increasing?
So what they're talking about is the progression levels in adaptive training, break down how you're progressing in each power zone. So what they're talking about is looking at how you're progressing specifically in that VO2 max power training zone.
And it's so motivating. We talked about this before, Amber, in the beginning of the podcast, but it's so motivating to be able to see like, hey, my VO2 max number is going up. And honestly, Mimi, that's a direct measure of what you're doing. So that there's not a lot of extrapolation there, right? So you're just doing it and you did it. Therefore, that's where you are. So that's really nice and reliable. If you're joining us on YouTube, by the way, I think we started a flame here with the Strava KOM discussion. So let us know in the comments if you're watching this in post, how you feel about what should be counted on Strava KOMs. Then we can get all this together. Chad, I see that you threw something into rapid fire and it looks like you, I don't understand.
You shouldn't. It's very cryptic. I didn't know where else to bring this up. And at the time, the rapid fire section hadn't really been filled in. So I thought this would be a good spot. It's really just to discuss one thing, but it reminded me of another. So rags, that's it. It's the topic. Everyone uses sweat towels, right? Indoors, and they get stinky, funky after a while. So some people do, and I do. And they get stinky, and I, for whatever reason, feel compelled to hang on to them and just gut it out, and they'd get stinkier and stinkier. And I'm still washing them and hoping for the yes, I wash them, Nate.
White ones and bleach them. You should be good.
Yep. But you use the same rag a lot, and it doesn't matter what you do.
Even with Chad.
Shop towels. Can I make my point, Nathan? Shop towels.
No. Your hygiene. You're wearing bibs twice. Not washing your sweat towels.
Okay, shop towels. Shop towels make good sweat towels. I prefer the white ones and the blue ones. The blue ones I use for snot rags. The white ones I use for sweat. And I don't confuse the two, right? Yeah. And they are, you get a copious amount.
That part of hygiene.
It is a very good idea. Don't ever mix it up either. You can get a huge amount of them for not a lot of dollars. And when they do stink, you just throw them away. Or, you relegate them to a chain rag or something. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. That just reminded me, this thing that I'm going to talk about just reminded me is Swedish dishcloths. If you haven't heard of these are the best thing to have. And I've been using the heck out of them in this hot weather. Stick them in a cooler if you're at a race, stick them in the fridge if you're going on a ride, dampened. And they're basically chamois, like chamois that you would use on a car.
Oh, cool.
That sort of chamois. And they're cheap and they're highly reusable. So instead of those little flavor pack towels that you can use maybe twice if you're lucky, but typically just one time, they're awesome, especially if they're cold. Get home from a hot ride, get back from a hot race and slather, basically wipe yourself down with a cool towel that you can wring out and reuse, wash and reuse. Super nice. And they're not too expensive. So I highly recommend it. Just a little pro tip that I stumbled onto.
Awesome.
These are great for the kitchen rather than a sponge. They work really well to clean stuff and to wipe down counters. And then when they get dirty, you put them in the dishwasher. Or every time you're in the dishwasher, you throw it in, you come out, and they last a really long time. And they do a better job, I think, than a sponge or a paper towel for cleaning stuff up.
Check this out.
Agreed.
Housekeeping and domestic tips from the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast.
Never know what you're going to get.
Chad, when I get home from a hot ride and I'm all sweaty, I shower. So,
Chad doesn't shower. Did you not know? He just does the Swedish dishcloth.
Shower.
Sorry for giving you a hard time, Chad.
It's mostly a race suggestion, but I have used them after hot rides lately, and it cools you off.
That's a good idea, actually. You could throw them in the cooler with the rest of the stuff that you have, and post race, so then you're not gross. Yeah, good one. Okay, David's question. He says, I'm 68 and still trying to improve. He mentions that he didn't get serious until 61 and joined TrainerRoad 3 years ago. So good on you, David. Way to go. He says, against my peers, according to one database, I do pretty well, about in the top third, with short power bursts of 60 seconds or less. But in 5 to 60 minutes, I'm in the bottom third using watts per kilogram, but same general fallout in watts alone. So I assume that what he's looking at is probably that Cat 1 to 5 power chart that has been referenced pretty regularly.
Power profiling.
Yes. Mm-hmm. He says, besides losing weight, currently at 188 pounds, would it be better to use a plan with more zone 2 base and endurance, something like the polarized plans, traditional base, that sort of thing, or more tempo and sweet spot work to improve power in longer increments of 20 to 60 minute power? I'm considering a Nationals Masters 40K time trial next year, but still enjoy Grand Fonda length events. Chad, what would you say on this one? You first.
Yes, my advice is a little more general than what's coming up, but I recommend forgetting the kilograms part of that equation, simply because, well, first off, bring your watts up and everything improves anyways, regardless of what happens to your body weight. And secondly, the type of course that you're doing. I mean, the whole courses for horses, if you're doing 40K TTs and they're flatter, or, whatever your preference is, maybe you'll train using fondos, that sort of thing. And those are flatter too. It's really just about the watts on the road. I mean, Nate and I went on a ride a couple months back, and his fitness is way better than mine, but we got on the flat dirt.
True.
And I could hang in there. That's also true. And I could hang in there. But when the road tipped upward, he was gone. There wasn't anything I could do about it. But on the flat stuff, which is what I really prefer, and I had a really good day. So if those are the sort of courses you're pursuing, and if you're looking at a flat time trial, I wouldn't worry about your body weight at all. I mean, no, that's it.
Yeah.
I wasn't pushing the flats, just so you know.
Oh gosh, get out of here, this guy.
We tailed off the other two riders. They were both pretty fit guys, so we were going good.
It's got to be on the bingo card.
I would say too that, like, looking at the Coggin chart, I think that well, it depends on your size, but I think that the FT, the FTP column is is too high for the category. And based off too the numbers that we see inside of TrainerRoad, for like the bell curve of cyclists, it's way too high. And especially then if you think of this as the power you can actually hold for 60 minutes, then it's way too high, because most people can't do it for 60 minutes. They're more like a 30-minute or 40-minute unless they really train it up. So I'm looking right here, Cat 2, like 4.5 for men. That's kind of in the middle and goes up to like 4.8. Now it's Cat 2 at like 4, and I could do fine. Great. I could win races.
Yeah.
So
Amber, how about you?
I think there's a couple of ways that you can approach this, and I think there's a bottom up approach and a top down approach, and I think they're not mutually exclusive. And probably your best bet is to do a mix of both. So bottom up is to say you want to build that general aerobic fitness and muscular endurance that will support that kind of work, right? Like you can't just jump in and be able to do it. You have to build out all the machinery. And when I say machinery, I mean, the cardiovascular system. So your circulatory system, building out all that vascularization to supply the muscles with oxygen. You want to build up mitochondria, the number of mitochondria, the efficiency and size of the mitochondria, all of those little aspects of the machinery that will support that kind of work. You need to build that up from the bottom. So that's aerobic fitness, muscular endurance. That's kind of set the stage for being able to do those longer efforts at higher power. So you're going to gradually build that steady state power from the bottom up. The other approach is to take it from the top down. So you activate top end power with more accessible, as in shorter efforts, with bursts of, maybe it's a 30-second burst and then building up to 1 to 2 minute intervals, and then building into longer intervals. And so you're starting with top end power. These top end power type efforts that are shorter, they're shorter to make them accessible with those higher power outputs, but they teach your body the motor patterns and the sensations of producing really high wattage. So what does it feel like? What do you need to do neuromuscularly in terms of moving your legs? What are those sensations when you're just producing really high absolute power? You may not be able to do that for a long time at first, but teaching your body what that feels like is really important. And then as you start at that top end, you can start to extend the time that you're putting out higher levels of absolute power, and that's the top down approach. So bottom up, top down, I think doing a little bit of both really helps you get to this goal of being able to put out higher power for longer. So you need that long, steady state bottom up foundation to support these types of efforts, but you also at the same time need to teach your body what it feels like to be putting out really high wattage, and then you kind of meet in the middle. So that's kind of, I don't think it's all or nothing. There's no one secret silver bullet that's going to give you exactly what you're looking for, but I think that doing a little bit of mix of both will probably be a good path to get there.
I've got some thoughts on this one too, that there's a temptation to think that, okay, I need to do longer efforts. I need to be better at those. So I need to do a lot of low intensity work to get there. Mm-hmm. But so much of this comes from specificity. When you're talking about 5 to 60 minutes, you need to be able to maintain a high percentage of your threshold, and you need to work at that. It's not by maintaining just a low percentage of your threshold for a really long time that you're going to get there. That sustainability work, even if you do a ton of just Z2 work, that sustainability comes from you also working at sustaining that higher level at specificity. So 40K TT plan, that sort of thing is really going to work on that. If in your case, David, if you're going to do a 40K time trial, that plan is going to be fantastic for you at making you better at that. Can I just take a quick moment to talk about the polarized plans and zone 2 in general? I want to cover some myths. I've been following I've been disregarded. I've been following the polarized plan now for, I guess, just about 9 or 10 weeks. And there's a myth about zone 2 that I want to share with everybody, is that it's just easy, and it's not. It's hard.
Zone 2 for Coggin, not for polarized.
Right. And if you're riding so go out and ride at basically 70 to 80% of your threshold and hold that for 2 hours and see how you feel.
It's really hard.
It's hard. It's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, and getting used to just holding that for a long period of time, that's tough. I mean, Amber, that's a lot of the work that you did as a pro cyclist. Is those long days are not just like getting to spin around and take Instagram clips the whole time and stop for treats at a bakery. It's hard work. So I think that there's this myth that exists where people polarize the polarized sort of training even more so than it actually is. And they think that, oh, it's super easy, and then I just go really hard on one day or another. But to be frank, when you're really working on basically pushing up that VT1 and VT2, it's uncomfortable. It's hard stuff. So it's productive training too. So I've been really liking the polarized plans. I think high volume has been too much for my life currently right now. I've been burning the candle at both ends, and my fatigue has just been steadily ramping up. And I think that I need to drop back to mid volume. Because I've been doing I've been averaging somewhere around 10 hours a week now for a while. And that gets pretty tough when life doesn't. That's in terms of TSS, even though TSS isn't as important as my progressions, somewhere around like 500 TSS basically is what I've been carrying. And it's hard with life. So I think I'm going to step back after nationals and look at mid volume possibly. So anyways, just wanted to cover that. So
Nice.
yeah, Nate.
The new AC unit is gigantic. I'm so excited. It's way
Good
bigger.
luck stealing that one.
There are 3 others to steal, but it's way bigger than the other one. I thought it was on like a lift, but I just looked. It's not. So John, this is good for both of us since we both have
Are you getting super warm right now? It's like
No.
so hot. I've got my arms out so I don't like pit through my shirt right now. It's hot in here.
You should rub your legs less because that probably causes like friction and heat.
Can you guys hear it on the mic? Yeah. People are just having terrible visuals through this episode. I apologize to everyone. Okay, Tom, his question is basically when to mark a rider or go solo. He says, hey, I love the show. We have a local 8-race mountain bike series starting soon, and a friend and I race a few of the races each year. He beats me every time. I started doing TrainerRoad mostly to beat him this year. Good on you, Tom. I like that. Specific goal. Beat that person. So he says, my wife is the only person who knows I've been doing it. Ooh, he's been secret training. He says, my question is, in our first race, do I race my own race? Or if possible, do I settle in behind him as long as I can and crush him at the end? He says, thanks. If the race goes well, I'm going to do all 8 this year.
This is you at nationals, John, right? This is the question.
Yeah. Do you go off on your own or do you mark people?
And it's different in mountain biking versus road a ton.
Yes, because mountain bike racing, it will always boil down to an individual time trial for us amateurs. Like if you're really the top pros, then maybe you can play games and tactics. But if you go to any amateur mountain bike race, it's an individual time trial is usually what it boils down to.
With passing though, the passing is the one thing and descending and getting stuck behind people.
Position is important.
Yeah, extremely important. So, I mean, here's my vote. Tom, if you know that you are within reach of him, then you just grab his wheel and you stay on his wheel. If he starts to do things where you feel like, oh my gosh, this is a foolish move, you let those sort of things go with the plan to uncork it at the end. However, because I'd much rather do that than bet on myself and do some risky move where I go all in and I end up blowing up, right? So I think that that's the best approach. But I could see you taking the other approach of just going from the gun. If you know, for example, that your friend is not a strong starter. And if your friend is not a strong starter who doesn't fight for position, that sort of stuff, you can get a gap and make them work too hard so that they're gassed at the end, or you can spook them. I tried to do that with Brandon and it almost worked last year. We did a mock short track race and it was like 480 something watts up at like 8,000 feet for like a minute and a half.
Is that a lot?
Well, yeah.
Sorry.
Look at that.
Just joking.
Ouch. That was
That's
a ton for
it's
me.
A whole bunch of lot.
It was a lot. Yeah. And I dropped Brandon, and Brandon said at that point in the race, he was like, if this is how hard cross country racing is, I'm screwed. I'm just sitting up. But then I blew up spectacularly, and Brandon saw me coming back, and then he just blew by me the next lap. So, I mean, but you may be able to do it within reason and not be so foolish as me and maybe spook them. So
before we get into what Amber's wrote, what John is saying too is to put out the most watts, and it's cross country is tough because you have climbs and then you have descents where you can't pedal. But generally, a steady state effort on those climbs is going to get you faster than if you go hard, easy, hard, easy, hard, easy, hard, easy, to an extent, because there's going to be times you're going to want to maintain momentum over little pitches and stuff like that. But if you just go, you probably felt it on one of those efforts where you start a 30-second attack and then you have to hold like 95% for 8 minutes. And that 95% for 8 minutes is you are dying. Where you could have probably held 100% for 10 minutes, no problem. And it wouldn't have been a hard thing. But that little 30-second kicker just destroys you. So in the race happens the same way. But on the road, because of aerodynamics, that is usually the winning move, is you have to get separation and then go. But Amber, you've got a lot of stuff written here. You want to talk about that?
A lot of it's just echoing what Jonathan said, honestly, because I think there's multiple ways of approaching this, but it kind of sounds like your secret fitness is your superpower here. And I think tactically, when people are underestimating you, it gives you a lot of options. So I'm not a mountain biker, so I would defer to Jonathan's advice here. But when I read this question, the first thing I thought of is, I love this shark in the water tactic of lulling your competitor into complacency. But I generally like to adopt the mindset of like, let's see what I can do. And so I'd worry that you might limit yourself by waiting too long and focusing too much on this particular competitor. So I would suggest potentially doing kind of a combination of both. Start out by getting a sense of your buddy's pace. And like Jonathan said, if he's not a good starter, that already might put you on the back foot if you're behind him and he's already got you in bad position right at the get-go of the race. But so that's something to consider. But you could just start out by getting a sense of his pace and where he's at on the day, and then reassess. If it feels like that pace is just way too easy for you, then maybe it's worth going early and giving it a shot. And if it's feeling a little bit more difficult than you anticipated, then you might want to wait a little bit longer before you really make your move. So I would take some time to assess the situation and get a better feel for exactly what's happening on the day, and then adapt your plan accordingly. But again, like Jonathan said, that start and key positioning points on the course, which will set you up for maybe a long single track section, those are really important too. So I wouldn't count those out.
Allow me to make some assumptions about your friend in this case. He's a competitive, red-blooded male who always beats you. And if you are on his wheel, I promise you, he will not be sandbagging you. He will be trying to get rid of you, and he'll be wondering, what the heck is wrong with me? I can't drop him, right? That will frustrate him. So I bet if you do the shark in the water, like Amber's talking about, and you hang on his wheel, I bet he's going to go to his limits. So if you can stick with those limits or go beyond them, that's fantastic. The best spot to hit people, honestly, with a cross country race is many times not on the most obvious climb, because everyone's going to go hard. And if it's a short climb, anybody can go hard for a little bit. It's over the top of that, or it's in those steady state sections thereafter. That's when the real gaps happen. Even if you watch World Cup racing, it's not that somebody gets blown up on, or you'll see a gap open up on a steep climb maybe, but the real time lost is after that. That's when it really hits. So that's the best tip I could give for you guys, but I can't reveal my tactics for nationals. Don't want to talk about that at all. But Chad, does any of this resonate to you? Because I remember a point when Nate said that, you said, you will never beat me on this podcast to Nate. Yep.
I cut that out. Like, I need to find that, because that should make it into a poster.
There's all part of my motivational process. And it worked. It totally worked. So I'll own that.
You were coaching Nate. That's honestly, how you raised Nate up. Yeah.
I want to view this through a wider lens and just take a step back and just acknowledge that you are talking about a friendship here. And that when you make your racing about beating one person, I can spin things a certain way. So just be clear on that. I've had it. I mean, Nate and I, it was all in good spirit, but it did make things a little less fun for me for a while there, I'll be honest. But I had a duathlete competitor back in the day, and we were good friends, and racing and beating him frequently did not further our friendship.
Flex.
So it's a flex because he was pretty fast, but
yeah.
Just maybe think about that.
That's a good point.
I think
Really good point.
Yeah. It depends on who they are. That's a good personality thing. Is sometimes it can be super fun, and it's like a Strava KOM. It's not a big deal if somebody wins, the other person wins, and I guess it depends on who the person is, right? And some people, the person who's the Strava KOM, it's a big deal for them too in either situation.
Yeah, I think that it can be really helpful and fun. Once again, remember, these aren't professional athletes. If it's the sort of personalities that can, and you have the sort of friendship that lasts far beyond the course, then it can be really fun and it can be a cool thing, and you'll be happy for your friend will be happy for you. It's been that way for me. In the cases when I beat somebody or somebody beats me and it was unexpected, you're still happy for them, you know? So, and I love the rivalries. I love that sort of stuff. It's fun. None of us get to race the tour and have these rivalries in front of the world, but that doesn't matter. We can have them just with our close friends and stuff. So it's a blast.
It can be a lot of fun and add a lot, especially, but really that only works if both parties are on the same page, right? That's the really key thing. If you're both in it to play and have fun and get better at what you're doing, and so you're pushing each other and appreciating how the other is pushing you to achieve better and better results or become better and better as an athlete, that's all positive and that's all good. But it is important that you're both on the same page. So Chad, that's a really good point.
Amber, did you ever have that person in the pro peloton and maybe you weren't on the same page? You just silently checked results and you're like, I beat that person, because you're hyper competitive. I know you are.
I am hyper competitive, but I'm really, really open about it too. And I'll say, I don't think it was ever just one person, but there were a bunch of us, a bunch of professional riders, you know, and we'd see each other in the peloton and we would push each other and we would show no mercy in the race. But then, you know, we'd be couldn't wait to go on a coffee ride the next morning and break it down and talk about what happened. But all in good fun and all with that understanding of, you know, hey, we're all here to do a job. We're all here to get better at what we're doing. And if we can push each other to be better, it's gravy. It's awesome. So I think I was really lucky in that the people that I was really working with and racing with and against were all very much on the same page with that. But I've definitely seen it play out otherwise. Thankfully, I can't remember a scenario where I've really had a negative experience with that.
We have this at Cape Epic.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so fun.
It's all fun. It is a source of motivation, and it's going to be interesting. And that first day, you know, we'll be in like 5 minutes, and then after those days, it'll be like 30 minutes, and we'll go to an hour, and then 2 hours, and it'll be.
And then at that point, we're just supporting you all. Then it's just commiseration at that point, right? We're all somehow going to get through this thing together. So
I don't know how much satisfaction you can draw from a victory over two really hungover dudes, but do you?
I don't think you guys are going to drink a lot. Maybe like one, but because it's such a huge effort, I don't think it's going to happen.
No, we're going to be so exhausted, it's going to be like, I think looking at it, I don't see how it's going to be. Like 6 hours is going to be a pretty fast day for Brandon and I on a lot of those stages. That's a lot. Have we thought this through? Like what we're doing?
I need to start.
You're better off not thinking it through, Jonathan.
No, I just keep banking on something coming up that prevents us from going.
Well, I got pregnant.
COVID.
I guess I better get cracking.
108 days. That's what I have down.
That's great. It's coming. I don't think it's gonna. It looks like it's gonna go forward. So
there's just a spike in South Africa at the moment, but their spike.
Oh, is there?
They manage their spikes pretty well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll see. Regardless, I'd rather do it now than any point later. It's one of those things where like I'm never going to be like I'm fully prepared to do Cape Epic full gas every day. Like that's not going to happen. So I'm going to train for it, but it's never going to be easy. You know, it's going to be hard no matter what. Yeah. So, yeah. Let's go into some live questions with just the handful of minutes we have left here. One of the live questions that we got that I'm not seeing on here yet is a person asking for updates on how adaptive training is taking into account outside rides. So we've seen a few people ask questions on this, and we have a team specifically working on this, right, Amber? That's a big focus for us.
It is in the works.
Yep. So that's a big piece, and it's a really complex problem to solve. And we have a really good, we have some super smart and capable people on it.
There's two parts of this: or structured TrainerRoad outside workouts. That, correct me if I'm wrong, Amber, but that works today with Garmin, and then we're working on Wahoo. And then there is unstructured outside rides. The unstructured part is not going to happen with initial adaptive training launch for everybody. But we should be able to have the Garmin and Wahoo, well, Garmin's done and Wahoo done by then. That, though, is a huge piece. And we're making good progress on it. And I don't have a timeline, though, for when that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So it's an exciting problem to solve. And
it's a little bit of holy grail. Like, it's pretty cool. I think
because
no one's ever done it before in this kind of way.
Brains on it. It's super exciting.
I was just gonna say that when we start talking through like how it's solved, and when I talk with them, I'm really glad that we have people like you working on this.
You just goes.
Yeah, it's like that meme when the gal's like she has like all the math and trig flying by her face, the gal from CSI. And I just end up confused. So, okay, another one says, "Hi everyone, longtime listener. A question to Chad. What to do to make sweet spot based training plan?" And he says, more interesting, but here's what he's really talking about. He says, "I like sprint workouts, but will that hurt the progression?" So Chad, first of all, we talked about this before, that like, if you do like occasional sprints or something, it's not going to throw everything off. But if you're really following a sweet spot progression, like you should be following it, it's demanding, just like anything else. And it's pretty tough. So if you're like substituting those days when you should be making steps up a ladder for sprint work, then you're probably missing out and you're just focusing on something else. Right, Chad?
Yeah. You about covered it. I mean, you got to decide, do you want to keep it interesting or do you want to progress your muscular endurance? Because the two things don't necessarily align.
Yeah.
I do think that you can sprinkle sprints, little short 5 to 8 second sort of efforts into just about anything. And you can kind of see how it goes. I mean, a handful of those in even a 3x30 workout could actually work out for you once you've worked up to the point where you can do 3x30 minute sweet spot efforts. But if you want to dress it up a little bit, that's one thing. If you want to swap in a whole different workout in place of a sweet spot workout, you are going to affect your progress.
Yeah, for sure. And look, like there does come a point where doing the work is tough sometimes. You want to do something else. But if you're really working toward a specific goal, I'm sure, Amber, there were plenty of days where you didn't feel like doing your 5-minute VO2 intervals, or you didn't feel like doing your 5 hours of riding at a specific intensity and holding that and just boiling like a frog in water.
I think everybody's got like an Achilles heel training zone where it's just like, that's the one that I just dread, or I really don't like it. But I think another way of looking at this is, can you figure out a way, mental tricks to get you through some of these sweet spots? So instead of changing the work that you're doing, can you use it as an opportunity to start creating some mental strategies that make you a little bit mentally more resilient for efforts like this, right? Because if you get into a race or a time trial where you really have to just sit and hold steady power for a really long time, having developed those mental superpowers to enable you to do that is it's not bad. So it's as much about the physiological progression as it is learning how to mentally engage and get yourself to a place where you can mentally hang in for those long efforts.
For sure. I think that's one of the biggest things that I see in athletes like Amber and other professionals, is that they have a steel mind. Like they've refined it over time. And you see this outside of athletics too. Just people that are really good at something, that have worked really hard at it, they're able to focus. And when
the opposite isn't true.
What's that?
So the opposite isn't true. There's no like top performers in the world that have like a really weak mental game.
Right.
And they can't like push themselves and stuff. That's a huge part of it.
I want to let everybody in on a secret though, because from the outside looking in, you might think it's like steel mind, and that might be what it looks like. But I guarantee you, everybody who looks like they have a steel mind has all kinds of quirky little mental tricks that they're using internally. Yeah. You just have to figure out which ones work for you. Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Everything looks good from the surface. Down below, legs are kicking like crazy. So Craig says, I have an 85-mile, 8,250-foot event on Saturday. Should I consume 100 grams of carbs per hour, expecting a zone 2 to 3 day, and it's going to be around 82 degrees. So good on you for looking at around zone 2 to 3. you're probably not. A lot of people are like, I got to look at my VO2 for those big days. And like, really it's about lasting. So Nate, what would you say on this one?
I would say if you've never done it, then no, because that would like you're gonna like throw up probably, or have a really bad day. I mean, if this was on Saturday, do what you do in training, and then in the future in training you can try to up it and get to there. But I would not, change it on the race day. That'd be tough.
Yeah, do what you've been doing. Oh, go ahead,
Sorry.
Jonathan.
No, please you. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, absolutely don't make a jump in the amount that you're taking in on the bike. Don't change up the type of food that you're taking on the bike. Like Nate said, stick with what you've been doing in training. If you're concerned that the amount isn't going to be enough, then I would focus on frequency rather than absolute amount. So just getting little bits of fuel, whether that's what's in your bottle or something in your pocket, but just sending that signal to your brain on a pretty consistent basis that it's okay to keep writing checks because you have deposits coming in. That signaling will go a really, really long way. And it's not necessarily, that will offset if you're not getting quite the calorie density that you might have wanted.
What you can do is carb load though. And you have to go to the extent of 8 to 10 grams per kilogram body weight. But even if you just try to hit 6, 6 is probably more than what most people are used to, but it's not so much that you're going to like really feel horrible if you go to the big one. But you could do 6 for the 2 days before, and that would add to your glycogen, and that would make it so you wouldn't have to consume as much. Your deficit wouldn't be as big. It can have huge performance improvements.
Yeah, there's no hard and fast prescription here. It's a lot of this is highly individual, and that individual context that's really important is what works on your stomach that's not going to give you GI issues. So that's sticking with things that that you've vetted work for you, and that's sticking with amounts that work for you too. So whatever you've figured out that works for your individual physiology, that's what you want to go with. That's the most important thing.
I will say that when you can get to the point where you can take in more carbohydrates per hour, process them well without GI distress, it feels like you're cheating. Like compared to what most people take in. And then when you can get to that 80 to 100 grams an hour range, somewhere around there, it's powerful. Like it's absolutely transformative. So even talking to very high performing athletes who have focused on this year, and their end of race performances in particular are in a different level entirely from what they were able to do before. So, that's how it's been for me. I've worked this year on getting up to 100 grams an hour for XC races, and just doing it through drink mix, not doing it through gel. And honestly, it took a while for that to be able to adapt, but it's a huge play because this year I have almost negative split some XC races, or 2 big XC races for me. And I've never been able to do that before because I was taking in like 60 grams an hour roughly. Wow. But now I'm way higher, and you can do more, as particularly at the end. It makes a huge difference. So it's definitely something you have to work into though. Ain't no day like race day, like they say. And that does not apply for trying new things like throwing a bunch of carbs into your gut and hoping it works out. So
especially on a hotter day, that could be even harder. Oh, John, what's your, how long's is it 90 minutes for your XCO race?
Should be about 90 minutes. Yep. Yeah. Just a touch over probably. So
that will have impact, but the real impact I think is that 82 mile day. And it's like hour 4 or 5. That's where you feel a lot better.
Yep. And where I feel the difference is being able to punch more at the end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like that's what Yep. Yeah. And that's a lot of people in crits just take in water, or they take in like electrolyte mix. And I have that thing packed full of high density carbs, and you get used to the cotton mouth. You get used to the dryness. You get used to the stickiness and the sweetness. I call it the taste of speed. And if you don't like it, then that's a shame to let taste get in the way of speed. So,
for flat crits, I would carb load the day before, and then I feel like I could go hard like that. Because oftentimes too in a crit, it's just one extra time that you can go hard, right? That one extra time where it's not super depleted and everyone else is depleted. And that is either the winning move or it's the finish. And it's such a small, you think about it, one extra interval in TrainerRoad where you've done that with the last interval, you can't make it. And then your competition does it for that interval.
Oh,
that's the
I think
race,
about that every
right?
single workout. Yep. Yeah. Every single one of them. So yeah. But for your event, like Nate was saying, whereas I feel it on like the high intensity punching at the end of the race, you're just going to be able to sustain so much more than you otherwise would be able to on those big days. So awesome. This has been a great podcast. Thanks y'all for joining on this one. And thanks everybody for joining on YouTube. If you're watching now, give it a thumbs up. That's the homework assignment. We appreciate it. And also jump down to the comments. Let us know how you feel about things like using a towel to clean yourself instead of taking a shower, or KOMs. Things like KOMs, carbs, and all the awesome deep dive stuff that Chad gave us on a surprising take to looking at everything there. So
if
Nate,
someone could, no, I won't say it. Oh.
that was judgment, wisdom right there.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you can say controversial stuff in order to get more comments on YouTube, and then it will propel the thing. And I was going to ask for people to explain something to us, but that's probably not a good idea. And I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. All right,
tell us your best ways to clean smelly towels. That's probably a good way.
There we go. That will light the whole world up. You're right, Nate. Everyone's interested in that. Fantastic. Yeah. So thanks everybody for joining us. Share the podcast with your friends and check out TrainerRoad. Sign up for the adaptive training beta. More people are getting at it every week, and check out the other podcasts and the blog. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks everybody.
Bye everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks everybody.